The city howled. The wind screamed through the narrow alleys, rattling windows and shaking the very foundations of the buildings. It was as if the city itself was alive, a beast roaring in the night. Rain lashed against the windows of the pizza place, a relentless drumming. Each drop seemed to carry the weight of the storm, pounding with a fury that matched the wind's howl. Jess, huddled in her faded bomber jacket, watched the storm swallow the streetlights. The glow of the lamps flickered and dimmed, struggling against the onslaught of the rain. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Another delivery slip snagged on the hook. The paper fluttered in the draft, a small, fragile thing in the face of the storm's might. The address, scrawled in shaky handwriting, sent a shiver down her spine. It was almost illegible, as if written in haste or fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was far, out in the forgotten edges of the city. Nobody went there, not at night, not in this weather. The streets were deserted, the usual hum of the city replaced by the relentless drumming of the rain. She hesitated, then grabbed her helmet. The cold metal felt like a promise, a shield against the storm. She knew she had to go, despite the gnawing doubt in her mind. The storm wouldn't stop her, not tonight. She had a job to do, and she wasn't one to back down. The rain was just another obstacle, one she was determined to overcome. Jess wrestled her scooter through the wind, the city lights blurring into streaks of red and yellow. The rain pelted her, each drop a tiny hammer against her skin. She felt the weight of the storm pressing down on her, but she pushed on. She navigated flooded streets, dodging fallen branches and debris tossed by the gale. Doubt gnawed at her. This delivery felt different. There was an edge to the night, a sense of foreboding that she couldn't shake. A knot of unease tightened in her chest. She couldn't pinpoint why, but something about this delivery felt wrong. The storm seemed to echo her anxiety, each gust of wind a whisper of warning. The address pulled her forward, a beacon in the storm. It was a destination, a point of focus in the chaos. She clung to it, letting it guide her through the tempest. A mystery to be solved. The unknown called to her, a siren song in the storm. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, a thrill that cut through the cold. She pushed on, the roar of the wind swallowing her doubts. Each turn of the wheels was a defiance, a statement that she would not be deterred. The storm was a challenge, and she was ready to meet it. The rain intensified, each drop a tiny explosion against her visor. It was like riding through a waterfall, the water cascading around her. She could barely see, but she kept going, driven by a determination she couldn't explain. The city lights thinned, replaced by the looming shadows of abandoned warehouses and darkened homes. The buildings stood like silent sentinels, watching her progress. She felt their eyes on her, a silent judgment. Jess shivered, the cold seeping into her bones. She felt utterly alone. The storm was a living thing, a malevolent force that seemed to take pleasure in her struggle. The storm had become a malevolent entity, isolating her, driving her towards the unknown. It was as if the city itself was conspiring against her, pushing her towards a destiny she couldn't see. A flicker of fear, sharp and cold, touched her heart. She was on the edge, teetering between courage and terror. The storm was a test, and she wasn't sure if she would pass. She was in too deep to turn back now. The storm was her adversary, but also her companion. She would face it head-on, no matter what lay ahead. The storm-ravaged streets gave way to a narrow lane, the rain pouring down in relentless sheets, creating a symphony of water against pavement. This lane was choked with overgrown weeds and shadowed by gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The city, with its bustling life and bright lights, felt a million miles away, as if she had crossed into another world entirely. Jess steered her scooter slowly, the silence broken only by the wind's mournful cry and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. She felt eyes on her, watching from the darkness, an unsettling sensation that made her skin crawl. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, a primal warning that danger was near. She was being followed, hunted. The realization hit her like a cold wave, sending shivers down her spine. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The lane twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the unknown, each bend revealing more shadows and secrets. The houses, shrouded in darkness and draped in ivy, seemed to press in on her, their windows like empty eyes watching her every move. A sense of oppressive silence hung in the air, broken only by the rustling of unseen things in the undergrowth, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Jess's hand tightened on the pizza box, her knuckles white with tension. It felt strangely heavy, a burden she wasn't sure she wanted to deliver, yet she couldn't turn back now. But something compelled her forward, an invisible force driving her steps. A promise whispered on the wind, a hint of something just out of reach, urging her onwards. The lane opened into a small clearing, dominated by a towering oak tree, its branches swaying menacingly in the wind, casting long, eerie shadows. Jess cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening, the only sound now the beating of her own heart. She dismounted, her boots sinking into the mud with a squelch, the ground soft and treacherous beneath her feet. The air hung heavy and damp, thick with the scent of decay and the promise of secrets, each breath a reminder of the unknown. She felt a presence, watching her from the shadows, waiting. The feeling was almost tangible, a weight pressing down on her shoulders. Jess took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The path ahead was dark and foreboding, leading into the heart of the forest. She knew she had to follow it, no matter where it led. With a final glance back at the lane, Jess stepped forward, her resolve firm. The forest awaited, and with it, the answers she sought. A pair of eyes glinted from the darkness beneath the oak tree. The night was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The eyes seemed to pierce through the gloom, watching, waiting. Jess froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had been walking home, the pizza box in her hands growing colder by the minute. The sudden appearance of those eyes had turned her casual stroll into a nightmare. A figure emerged, shrouded in shadow, its features obscured by the gloom. It moved with a purpose, each step deliberate and slow, as if savoring the moment. Then another, and another, until she was surrounded. The figures seemed to materialize from the very shadows themselves, their presence turning the night even darker. They moved with an unsettling grace, their silence more menacing than any threat. It was as if they communicated through their movements, a silent language of intimidation. Jess felt a chill crawl down her spine. The air around her seemed to grow colder, the weight of their gaze pressing down on her. These were not people she wanted to meet on a night like this. The storm clouds above rumbled, threatening to unleash their fury, but the real storm was right in front of her. She clutched the pizza box tighter, her knuckles white. It was a flimsy shield, but it was all she had. The box, once a symbol of a simple dinner, now felt like her only lifeline. It was her only shield in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. The figures seemed to sense her fear, their movements becoming more predatory, more deliberate. The figures circled her, their movements fluid and predatory. They were like wolves, closing in on their prey, their eyes never leaving her. Jess's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. Each beat echoed in her ears, drowning out the distant sounds of the storm. She was trapped, caught in a web of shadows and whispers. The figures seemed to whisper among themselves, their voices a low murmur that sent shivers down her spine. The storm raged around them, but she barely noticed. The wind howled, and the rain began to fall. But her focus was entirely on the figures that surrounded her. The figures held her captive, their silence a suffocating weight. It was as if the very air around her had thickened, making it hard to breathe. Jess flinched, her eyes darting between them, searching for an escape. But there was none. The figures had her completely surrounded, their intentions clear. They were closing in, their intent clear. Each step they took seemed to echo in the night, a countdown to her doom. She was out of time. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless and desperate. Just when she thought all hope was lost, a voice cut through the darkness. It was strong, commanding, and filled with an authority that demanded attention. A voice that sent a different kind of shiver down her spine. It was both a promise of salvation and a warning of danger. A voice that spoke of power and ancient secrets. It was a voice that seemed to come from another time, another place, and it filled her with a strange mix of hope and dread.
Leave her be.
The voice, raspy and low, seemed to emanate from the very air itself. The figures surrounding Jess hesitated, their attention drawn to the source of the command. She followed their gaze, her eyes widening as they fell upon a dilapidated Victorian house at the edge of the clearing. It loomed over them, its windows dark and lifeless, like the eyes of a predator. The house seemed to hold its breath, watching, waiting. Jess felt a strange pull towards it, a sense of inevitability that sent a shiver down her spine. She couldn't explain it, but she knew that whatever awaited her inside those crumbling walls held the key to this night's unsettling events. The storm raged around them, but within the clearing, an eerie calm had descended. Jess, compelled by an unseen force, took a hesitant step towards the house. The figures parted before her, their eyes never leaving her form. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, her every move scrutinized by unseen players. The air crackled with anticipation, the silence broken only by the creaking of the ancient oak and the pounding of her own heart. She was walking towards the unknown, and there was no turning back.